A warm dusk glow was settling over the city the night this memory carved itself into me. I was sitting alone in a quiet hotel lobby, waiting for a delayed ride, watching a man at the far end of the room struggle to steady his hands as he tried to sign a receipt. His laughter was loud, too loud, collapsing into itself, and his friend just watched with the kind of tired patience that only comes from cleaning up the same mess 100 times. I remember the way the light caught the man's face, how the shine wasn't joy at all, but a mask stretched thin over something hollow. I didn't know why that moment stayed with me so sharply, but it did, like a sentence waiting for its verb. At the time, I just thought it was another random scene in a world full of people trying to drown their noise. But something about his eyes, glassy, defeated, lost, felt like a reflection I didn't want to admit belonged to many of us in smaller, quieter ways. Later, when I heard someone mentioning how Islam speaks about alcohol and drugs, not with scorn, not with superiority, but with a kind of protective firmness, I felt an unexpected tug in my chest. It made me ask myself what that man might have looked like if he had been raised in a system that wasn't just telling him what not to do, but telling him who he could be without those chains. That question didn't leave me. It tapped on the inside of my mind like a guest who refused to go home. Why does a whole faith draw such a sharp line against these substances? Why such clarity in a world that blurs everything it touches? I had never asked that question with sincerity until that night in the lobby. And once the question appeared, it pulled others with it. What is Islam trying to protect? What is it trying to preserve? What does it know about us, about human nature, that many of us don't want to admit? I wasn't looking for a theological debate or a rule book explanation. I just wanted to understand why this mattered so much. And I think what surprised me most was realizing that the answer wasn't about control. It was about compassion. Because when I finally started to read, to listen, to understand the depth behind the teaching, it felt less like a law and more like a hand on the shoulder of a wandering traveler saying, don't lose yourself out here. Islam doesn't just ban alcohol and drugs. It identifies them as enemies of clarity, thieves of dignity, and silent destroyers of the mind. Not because humans are weak, but because we are precious. I remember reading a narration that described intoxicants as the mother of evils, not because they are the worst thing in the world, but because they unlock the doors to 1,000 other mistakes. That startled me. It felt brutally accurate. One compromise leads to another. One unguarded moment becomes a pattern. One escape becomes a dependency. What really touched me was how Islam approaches the heart. It doesn't only tell you what to avoid, it tells you why your soul deserves better. It tells you that your mind is a sanctuary, your body a trust, your heart a guest house for light, not fog. That hit me harder than I expected. We live in a culture that praises losing control as if it's some kind of freedom. Islam says the opposite. It teaches that real freedom is being able to look at yourself in the mirror without needing anything to numb the truth. And as I sat with these teachings, I began to notice how many people around me were carrying invisible withdrawals. Withdrawals from pain, from memories, from expectations they couldn't meet. Some used alcohol to forget, some used drugs to escape, and some of us, even without substances, carried our own addictions, busyness, validation, distraction. Suddenly the wisdom didn't feel foreign, it felt universally human. One night, I thought back to that man in the lobby. I remembered how his laughter shook like a cracked bell, and I imagined something different. Him waking up with clear eyes, with a mind that didn't have to fight itself, with a heart not wrapped in fog. The image made my chest tighten. It made me understand something simple but profound. Not everything that feels like a release is actually freedom. Some things chain you quietly. That's when the reflection started to settle deeper. I began connecting the dots between the moments in my own life when I had tried to escape myself. I wasn't someone who leaned on substances, but I wasn't innocent of running from my own shadows either. I realized that the real danger Islam warns about isn't just the bottle or the pill. It's the surrender of our inner steering wheel, the loss of awareness, the erosion of responsibility. Because when clarity dies, accountability dies with it. And when accountability dies, we drift into versions of ourselves we don't even recognize. I found it powerful that Islam places so much emphasis on consciousness, on being fully alive, fully present, fully aware. The prayer requires focus. The fasting requires discipline. The charity requires empathy. All of these acts need a mind that isn't clouded, a heart that isn't intoxicated by anything, substances, ego, desire, despair. It's a system built on clarity. It made me rethink what it means to be awake. I started noticing the quiet battles people fight when intoxication becomes an escape route. The friendship strained, the promises broken, the mornings filled with regret, the potential wasted. And I realized that Islam doesn't ban these substances to restrict joy. It bans them to protect the future version of you, the one who deserves peace. And then it struck me. In a world that teaches us to chase sensations, Islam teaches us to chase serenity. That's when I found myself whispering a line I had never said before. Peace requires clarity, and clarity requires courage. The more I reflected, the more I understood that courage isn't avoiding weakness. It's facing it without reaching for a crutch. I began to see micro stories everywhere. A friend who gave up drinking after his daughter asked him why he smelled funny. A coworker who beat an addiction after hearing a single line from a lecture. A stranger who told me that sobriety didn't give him back his life. It gave him a life he had never actually lived. There was a gentleness woven through all of this that I didn't expect. Islam doesn't shame the struggler. It warns of the struggle. It doesn't mock the addict. It tries to prevent the addiction. It doesn't condemn the weak. It protects them from what exploits weakness. The anchor lines began to form themselves in my mind. Intoxication silences pain by muting the soul. A clear mind is a doorway. A cloudy mind is a prison. What we consume eventually consumes us. Those sentences kept echoing whenever I thought about this topic, and each time they returned, they brought a strange kind of comfort, like truth was finally untangled from the noise. I imagined a world where people grew up hearing these teachings not as restrictions, but as reminders of their worth. A world where children learned early that they didn't need anything artificial to feel whole. A world where clarity was celebrated the way our culture celebrates escape. It made me wonder how many stories would end differently. How many hearts would break less? How many futures would stay intact? The older I get, the more I understand that peace is a fragile thing. It doesn't survive in chaos, and it certainly doesn't survive in the hands of anything that blurs reality. Islam's wisdom here is not ancient, it's timeless, it's not cultural, it's universal, it's not rigid, it's protective. And the strange thing is, even though I'm not Muslim, this teaching made me feel guarded, not controlled, guarded. As if someone was saying, your mind matters, your heart matters, your future matters. That kind of care is rare in modern philosophy. In Islam, it's foundational. When I think back to that hotel lobby again, I don't see judgment, I see tragedy. And I see how easily any of us could slide into the same darkness if we don't guard the gates of our own minds. I think that's what moves me the most about this teaching. It doesn't underestimate the human struggle. It understands it intimately. It understands that humans are not just logical creatures. We are emotional storm systems, easily swayed, easily wounded, and anything that weakens our clarity leaves us defenseless. So when Islam says, stay away, it's not pushing people out. It's pulling them back from an edge. As the years pass, I am learning to appreciate any voice, any wisdom that anchors me instead of numbing me. And I have found myself returning to this teaching again and again, not because of fear, but because of respect. Because I have seen what happens to people who lose the ability to steer their own lives, and because I have tasted moments of clarity that felt more intoxicating than any substance on earth. The truth is, peace isn't loud. It hums, it breathes, it settles gently when we make room for it. And I think that is what Islam protects with so much certainty, the quiet, sacred space in the human heart where peace wants to live. I don't pretend to fully understand all the depths of this faith. I don't claim any authority or expertise, but I can tell you this. Every time I encounter a teaching that protects the mind, I feel grateful. Grateful that someone, somewhere, believed human beings were worth safeguarding. Grateful that clarity is still considered sacred by someone. Grateful that discipline is not seen as oppression, but as a doorway to freedom. And tonight, as I think about that man in the lobby again, I find myself silently wishing him peace, real peace, the kind that doesn't vanish with the sunrise, the kind that doesn't come from forgetting, but from healing. Maybe that's what this whole journey has taught me, that the heart becomes its strongest when nothing artificial is holding it up, that sobriety isn't dryness, it's the soil where new life grows, and that a clear mind is not a restriction, it's a home. If there is one thing I carry from all of this, it's the feeling of being gently guided toward a life where my decisions are mine, my emotions are real, and my peace is authentic. I may not be Muslim, but there are teachings in Islam that feel like gifts addressed to the entire human family. And as this reflection settles into the quiet of my evening, I'm left with one final thought, soft, steady, and sincere. A clear heart hears guidance, a clear mind recognizes truth, and a clear soul becomes light. May we all learn to walk in that clarity, and may that clarity lead us home.